Some things happen without explanation. Some experiences haunt people for a lifetime. This is where I tell those mysteries. And remember, not everything can be explained. Story: Gehenna. It has been 3 months since I returned from Gehenna. In those 3 months I have not told a soul what I found there. Not my mother, though she asks why my eyes seem so empty. Not my father, though he wonders why I cannot bring myself to smile. I can no longer even bear to see old friends. I do not feel there is anyone left in the world who knows me. The person they all knew is gone, left behind like the shell of some sea creature destined to take a new shape and grow into something else. There is what my life was before Gehenna, and that person is a stranger even to me. There is only the life I'm living now, after Gehenna, and I feel like I am 1 billion years old and that even the stars are young in my eyes. It is no longer possible for me to say if what I found at Gehenna is right or if it is wrong, because the scope of it is still beyond my ability to judge. Yet I feel if I do not answer this question I will never be able to become human again. Though another part of me feels that being human was merely something I did when I was younger. That humanity is something for a child, and I outgrew it like I outgrew my toys, and that I cannot go back. When I was given the responsibility of God, set to judge the wicked, I accepted the responsibility. I ate the hamburger. No child would have eaten that hamburger. Yet, it was satisfying and I laughed to see the cows cry. Maybe all I have been feeling is merely an attempt to find absolution for that sin. Gehenna cannot be explained outright. Doing so would not let you experience the reality of that place. Gehenna must be experienced to be understood. Therefore, I will explain it to you as I experienced it, and then I hope you will forgive me for helping you to understand. A question. Young lady. A gentle shake on my shoulder woke me. The hands were soft, like old leather or a baby's earlobes. Kind hands. A grandfather's hands. I groaned coming awake, but the hands made me feel safe, so I did not scream. Focus. Please. Yes. Time to wake up. Gently. Gently. Quite a blow you took to the head. We shall have to get you an ice pack. But you have no concussion. I checked while you were sleeping. I have an important question for you. Please. Very important. So try to focus. I lifted my head, but my vision was too blurry to make anything out in detail. God, my head hurt. I remember it felt like my whole skull was about to split apart in 100 fragments. It was like a red wine hangover, but concentrated in one angry knot at the back of my head. A soft hand caressed my cheek, the only point of comfort on my entire skull. It might have been intrusive or offensive had not the hands been so kind. Sometimes I can still feel them there, and I shudder to think that the same hands which had built something so terrible once touched my face. If you were to eat the horse half of a centaur, would that be cannibalism? The words were just sounds, and I lacked the ability to put them together. But something about the way they were said caused me to jerk my head away. Even if I had understood, the strangeness of the question would have repulsed me. The oddness of it, the way the terror and absurdity of it made an alloy of unpleasantness. The knot on my head collided with the headrest of a heavy metal chair and the room spun. I tried to scream, but then I realized there was a rag in my mouth. Ah yes, the gag. Our Mr. Hoffman is being overzealous again. He worries about exposure. You see, Yet I have always planned for this facility to be public. Your break-in only advanced the date. Shake your head yes or no and we shall decide what to do with you. My captor, a bent-back and wizened old man who I could only assume was Jewish from the yarmulke on his head, sighed when he saw my obvious shock. With a sense of dread, I tried to move my hands and I realized I couldn't. I was tied thoroughly to the chair. Panic set in and I struggled against my bonds. Young lady, please, we are not the monsters that you suppose. I had no recollection of how I had come to be in the chair. All I could remember was breaking into the slaughterhouse with my friends and the horror we all felt while videotaping the atrocities that were being committed against the cows. I remembered the stink of blood and shit, which I could smell faintly even here. Then I remembered a darkness that came when something had struck me on the back of the head. Yes, calm now. It's not so bad as that. Calm please. Calm. The man's frail old hands pat me on my shoulder again, somehow slowing my breathing despite the danger I knew I was in. The incongruity of him, the sweetness of his old face in this bare concrete room with only a light bulb overhead. 2 chairs, and a drain in the middle of the flowers soothed me somehow. Like finding an oasis in the middle of a desert. I still do not know if I should have found that oasis to be poisonous or pleasant. Ah, I understand. Deciding what to do with you. Poor choice of words. My apologies. English is not my best language. You are not in danger. We will not hurt you more than you have already been hurt. Maybe we will have the authorities slap you on the wrist for trespassing. Yes, but we are not murderers. Far from it. So focus. A centaur, the creature from Greek mythology. Are you familiar? Part man and part horse? His hands were on both my shoulders now and he breathed in time with me, as if to pace me until I had calmed down. I nodded when sense began to return. The action more reflexive than deliberate. Heart racing so hard I could feel my pulse in my entire body. If you ate the horse part of a centaur, would that be cannibalism? He asked again. His eyes, despite their age, were clear and a dark brown, the color of fertile soil. I realized he was one of the oldest men I'd ever seen. Almost 100 years old. I'd say, maybe even older. I remembered the cows again. The pictures I'd taken on my cell phone. The horrors outside of this concrete room. The reason I'd come to this place. I screamed into the gag. The old man sat down and sighed, rubbing his lower back, fretting in a language I guessed was Hebrew. He seemed more distressed than diabolical. I cannot stand this. To be the cause of your screams? Bah, what we have done here is good and I will not have it tainted with these actions. If we remove your gag, will you speak with me civilly? I understand you are animal rights activist? That is the term? Yes. Good. Morality is very important to you. It is important to us as well. Mr. Hoffman, remove the young lady's gag, please. I didn't even know anyone was behind me when the hands came around my face and pulled away the gag. The hands smelled like the cows had smelled. Like sweat, shit, blood and fear. I gagged to have them so near my face. Young lady, I would like to have you on your way so your friends will not be worried about you. Will you? When the gag was all the way out, I screamed as loud as I have ever screamed in my life. Unmuffled, the scream was so loud it hurt even my ears. When I was done, I gulped down another chestful of air and screamed again. A scream so piercing it was like a needle until my lungs were so empty I could see stars. The old man winced and frowned, then gave that characteristic sigh again. "Would you like me to put the gag back in, sir?" the voice asked from behind me. The old man shook his head, emphatically. "We are not monsters, Mr. Hoffman. Our cause is a just one. She is scared. I will not have us be the kind of people who will gag a scared woman." The old man pointed a finger in the air, signaling an idea had just occurred to him. I thought for sure he was going to change his mind and order me executed. After what I'd seen him doing to those cows, I figured he had to be some kind of sicko. Maybe he is. I don't know. Like I said, I still can't figure out if what he's doing is right or wrong. Fully expecting to die, to my surprise, he only rolled up his sleeve and held his left forearm a few feet in front of my face. I saw a tattoo so faded it looked like a blur, but I thought there was some structure there. Numbers maybe, and what I believed to be a triangle under the numbers. The numbers. Yes. Look, you can see. The numbers. You see? Good girl. Very smart. You know what this is. Yes? Your schools still teach it. Good. May it never be forgotten. I see it in your eyes. Once I was held captive and hurt. I would like you out of those restraints as soon as possible. It is my sincerest wish. Will you speak with me? I nodded, mostly because I wasn't sure I could scream anymore. Then I started crying. I'd never been so terrified. Am I? Are you going to kill me? I asked between sobbing fits. So brave, snorted Mr. Hoffman. The old man snapped his fingers, like you would at a dog, with a loudness that belied his age. Mr. Hoffman went silent again. No, my word on it, I am in charge here. No harm will come to you. In fact, I apologize for your treatment. Mr. Hoffman said he found no explosives on your person, only pamphlets. You came here to spread your message. To take videos. Yes? Not to hurt anyone? You came to protect the animals? I very much respect this. I wish this had been done for me many years ago. I nodded again, unable to speak. Mr. Hoffman, please remove the restraints. Do not give me that look. We are not monsters. If you cannot do this work with a just heart, I can find others to replace you. We will not become what we are fighting here. Slowly, the restraints around my arms, legs and chest slackened. I saw the side of Mr. Hoffman's face as he maneuvered around me. He looked like Liev Schreiber except bigger and with a few extra pounds. Like he would have been handsome if he took better care of himself. Most of all, he wasn't that scary now that I could see his face. I took a full minute to catch my breath. I saw the cows. I panted. You do awful things here. I saw you tearing the skin off of cows that were fully awake. I saw a cow having its eyes burned out with a poker. I saw a man rip off a cow's legs with a... Bile rose in my throat at the thought. It was a pneumatic tugger, said the old man, helpfully. I pressed my head into my hands and let the tears flow. How can you do something so awful? That's monstrous. You're going to hell, I screamed. I found some of my fighting spirit again, now that I knew I was safe. In fact, I almost felt stupid for having been scared, like I'd betrayed my values. What I had gone through was nothing compared to the suffering of those animals. In another few minutes, I was sure I could work myself up to the level of anger I'd had when I broke into this place. The level of rage that I was then certain needed to be directed at a place such as this. Jews don't believe in hell. Mr. Hoffman chuckled from behind me. The old man shot a disgusted look over my shoulder. Much as I hate to agree, Mr. Hoffman brings up an important point. Jews do not believe in hell as you do. Though the name for this place comes from our closest analog, or actually, we have not yet been introduced. I am Dr. Abraham Adelman. Although I've been retired for some years, I was a neurologist. What is your religion? I normally would not ask so bluntly, but it has some bearing on the situation. You're fucking sick. I spat. Dr. Adelman's kindly grandfather smile didn't drop in the slightest. We are not what you suppose. Young lady, those creatures you care so much about are not innocent. Those are not cows out there. Or rather, I should say, they are not just cows. He sounded like he was explaining something simple. As to a child, what the fuck are you talking about? I felt the anger coming back. It felt good to be angry. I had never understood people who could be confronted by monsters and sit by idly and let them devastate the world. And it's that very conviction that now makes me so unsure of my first impressions of the slaughterhouse. For now I am older than I was then, and I understand hell can be virtuous. Justice. Young lady, those creatures deserve everything we are doing to them. Jews do not believe in hell. It was necessary for us to create one to find justice. That is what I am trying to explain. For the first time there was something cold in Dr. Adelman's face, and it made me think of something horrible my own grandfather had told me. When I was young, he had sat me on his knee and told me there was nothing in the world more dangerous than the fury of a peaceful man. Your name? The doctor insisted. Hannah. I said. Hannah Aronson. The doctor laughed. Delighted. I sense you are not observant. But you are Jewish, yes? Through your father's side at least? What else do I see? Do not tell me. Irish? Good. Wonderful. I can dispense with my questions. Then, a fellow Jew. What a blessing. Do you see, Mr. Hoffman? I am quite progressive on this. I have hope one day all races might be one. Then terrible men such as the one who brings us here will not be able to make us kill each other so easily. I heard Mr. Hoffman grunting behind me and I jumped forward in my chair. Dr. Adelman, all due respect, this is a threat to the security of the facility. Shush, Mr. Hoffman. You have never understood my designs for this place. Why, once the world knows of it, I imagine there might be something like global peace. This slaughterhouse is a deterrent greater than the atom bomb. Who would ever dare commit atrocities again if they knew they might end up here? Atom bombs were meant to deter nations from going to war, but jeopardize the world. This facility will stop the monsters who would lead their nations to war, and it targets no one but them. I stood up, which ended their conversation abruptly. Hey, listen, how do I get out of here? I want my phone and my backpack and I want to go home. Then I'm going to upload those pictures and show the world what fucking creeps you are. I still don't fucking get it. Are you getting paid for this? Are some sickos watching this on webcams somewhere? Animals deserve better than this. They've never done anything to anyone. I want out of here. Now, you sick fucking creeps. The doctor did not seem disturbed in the least, and Mr. Hoffman only chuckled. "You're American, yes? Of course. What else would you be with that accent? I will have questions later about how you heard about an Israeli slaughterhouse. But not today. You are American and we will be hospitable. Though I was liberated by Soviets, I owe much to your nation. Those animals, as I have said, are not innocent. In fact, after this, we will have a hamburger. French fries too. They are my favorite." I gave him the most patronizing look I could muster. I'm vegan, obviously, and I wouldn't eat anything that came off those poor animals even if I wasn't. The doctor laughed again, all out of proportion to the situation, and I wondered if he wasn't senile. "I am as well. We are so much alike. Young Hannah, I could not stand to eat meat after the camps. I felt too much compassion with the animals. I have no compassion for these creatures. We will let you go shortly. But may I tell you a story? In fact, I will tell you the story of this place. I will tell you why we do what we do. For your articles and newsletters and pamphlets?" I turned around to get a full view of Mr. Hoffman and was surprised to realize I was taller than he was by a full 4 inches. And for all his laughter, he seemed scared now that I was moving about under my own power. "I want my phone. I want to get someplace where I can see the outside. I want to let my friends know where I am. Then, yeah, I'll listen to your fucking story." Mr. Hoffman said several things I'm pretty sure were terrible curse words, but which I couldn't follow, and stormed out of a door that had been directly behind my chair. He returned with my backpack, which he shoved into my chest, and then disappeared again, only to return with a wheelchair. "You've already exhausted him enough. While you're in there telling our secrets, I'm going to go talk to the board. Some of them are more practical than Dr. Adelman." Somehow, I wasn't afraid of him. I snapped a picture of him with my cell phone. He blinked, and I think he would have ripped the phone out of my hands if the doctor wasn't staring right at him. "I'm going to make you famous," I sneered. Hoffman's face was stone. "I am going to talk to the directors about this. Dr. Adelman, we can't compromise this facility yet." Dr. Adelman ignored the comment. "Take us up to the visitors center. To the tour shuttle. It should be safe enough after the last week of construction. You can talk to the directors while I explain this place to Miss Aronson. That should give you plenty of time. I warn you though that they will agree with me. We are survivors. After all, I am confident the young lady will see our point of view after we explain." We navigated several tunnels and emerged in a dewy meadow I had seen on my arrival at this place. I could hear eerily human screaming not far away, and sounds like flesh being ripped apart. The sounds of the slaughterhouse. I was about to scream again when the doctor's hand was back at my arm. "Patience, Miss Aronson. All will be explained. Everything happening here is moral. And when we are done, you will share a hamburger with me." Dr. Adelman laughed. Even the thought of meat made me want to throw up. We walked a few dozen yards more, and I began to wonder if I was walking to my death. Except it all seemed so harmless suddenly. The way Hoffman pushed Dr. Adelman was so emasculating and pathetic that it turned off all of my internal alarms. Which is stupid, I know. Monsters don't look like monsters. They look like regular people. And sometimes, in real life, you can't tell the difference between a monster and a hero. Hoffman had to fight with several tarps and Dr. Adelman's wheelchair, but after 10 or so minutes we finally arrived at something that looked like a roller coaster. Hoffman put Adelman in the front cart and the doctor patted the seat next to him, signaling for me to join. "What the fuck is this?" I asked. "Justice," said Dr. Adelman again. "Justice that has taken me the better part of 80 years to attain." There are no audio recordings yet for the tour, so I will provide the narration. "One day, we plan that every Jew in the world should be able to come to this place and see what we have done here. Why not be the first?" "Are you crazy?" I asked, too confused to be angry. "Perhaps." Dr. Adelman laughed. "You tell me when the tour is done." I sent a text message to my friends and waited to make sure it had been sent, along with the pictures of Hoffman so they'd know who to look for if I went missing. And then sat down in the seat next to the doctor. Mr. Hoffman must have pressed some kind of button out of sight, because the next thing I knew the cart was lurching forward in that somewhat jerky way that roller coasters do. I felt the pit of my stomach drop as we made a sharp turn. We shot out across the dewy field for only a moment before we came to a stop in what looked like a museum. Everywhere I looked I saw old medical equipment from the early 1900s. Glass jars full of God knew what. Old textbooks, old notebooks, a picture of a young man who looked uncannily like Dr. Adelman. There were also several half-completed dioramas of medical offices. Ah yes, the resemblance is strong. Not me, though. That's my father. He was a brilliant surgeon in Munich before the start of the war. I was not quite 5 when that picture was taken. It is hard to explain to someone as young as you what hopes we had for science back then. It seems so much of that enthusiasm was lost afterward. The world saw what science could do at Hiroshima and Nagasaki and recoiled. Yet in my life, I saw us go from the horse and buggy to putting men on the moon. I saw us go from gas lamps to electric lights. My father believed that one day even death might be conquered. He was not alone. I'm afraid the next exhibit is not quite ready. It is mostly just ice. I should have brought you a jacket. The cart advanced into an empty facility and I shivered with cold. There was ice everywhere. On one wall was a picture of a brain, labeled in extraordinary detail. I looked over to the old man who seemed unaffected. His eyes were less mirthful in this exhibit, dark like they had been before. My father was a pioneer in the field of cryogenics. In fact, he made discoveries and breakthroughs in his work that were not replicated until the late 1980s and early 1990s. It is a common misconception that cryogenics is not viable due to ice crystals forming in the cells of the specimen. If water were used, it is true that it would cause irreversible cellular damage. However, this was not true even in my father's work. The key was to rapidly dehydrate a specimen after death and replace the body's blood with an antifreeze agent. The specimen was then not frozen but vitrified, turned, literally, into a sort of biological glass. Ice crystals do not make cryogenics non-viable. What makes cryogenics non-viable was that no one had any idea how to revive the specimen after it had been vitrified. At least at that time. The cart advanced again. We were in another room. This one full of pictures of Hitler. Everywhere I looked, there were pictures of Hitler. Mad eyes gleaming and his hand raised high. I was speechless. Videos played of his speeches. A whole biography of his life was laid out on all the walls. The Führer was, of course, attracted to this work, although he could not publicly admit that he found value in the work of one of the Juden. All mad men want to live forever. Charlatans have offered immortality to rulers for as long as humans have lived. Yet my father promised not immediate immortality, but the only practical path by which it might be attained. Freeze a brain. Wait until future science allowed it to be reanimated and the body to be reconstituted. I try to forgive my father for those early entreaties. He was not aware, then, of what was waiting inside of that wicked man. At first, Hitler paid my father to conduct research and left him alone to operate as a free man. This was before the final solution. Then, I and my family were sent away to the camps to serve as hostages while my father became something like a slave. Forced to freeze the brains of captive Jews to perfect the science of cryogenics. I am proud to say he fought this at first. It was not until they sent him my mother's head and my sister's eyes that he relented. I put my hand over my mouth. "Oh my God," I said. Dr. Adelman only shrugged. I do not believe God took any part. The cart rolled forward. We were in a room that seemed to be some kind of replica of a bunker. There were mannequins in uniforms everywhere. Everywhere I turned there were replica figures standing in various locations in full Nazi regalia. Then I noticed one diorama that made no sense. I saw a wax figure that looked like Dr. Adelman's father bending over the wax figure of what was obviously Hitler's corpse. Dr. Adelman's father was holding a jar, with a brain inside. God was not with us during the Holocaust. Perhaps he turned his back for a time. But we were not his chosen in the camps. Not in my opinion. Perhaps he came back later when the Americans and Soviets arrived. Anyhow, we could not rely upon God to condemn such a man such as Hitler to hell. Ah, here is the bunker, where the body of Adolf Hitler died and where his brain was secured and stored by my father. Yes, I know the story with which you are familiar. The bunker was raided later. My father escaped prior to that under guard. The guards who escorted him and the brain were among the last to surrender after the war. My father slipped away before that, and he kept the brain. He kept it. Do you understand? He got away with it. Dr. Adelman hissed the last few sentences. The kindly grandfather eyes replaced by something much harsher now and much crueler. The cart lurched forward and what I saw ahead was worse even than the cows. Everywhere around us were pictures of the Holocaust. A German in a jeep driving over the bodies of Jews. A mass grave. A German soldier throwing a Jewish baby up in the air and spearing it on his bayonet. Every horror of the Holocaust was laid open, bare and explicit in this room. One man caused the death of 11 million, 6 million of whom were Jews. Oh, he was helped. Others were also responsible, but his was the will that they obeyed, and so the ultimate responsibility was his. One man did all of this. One man killed my mother and my sisters and my brothers and forced my father to kill. One man sought fit to industrialize murder and exterminate a people. One man brought the nations of the world to war. The cart rattled forward again. This time I saw a modern lab and pictures of Dr. Adelman a few years younger than he was now. Surrounded by a team of researchers. It took 3 years for me to find my father again after the war. I was all that was left, and although still quite young, I was already on the path to becoming a doctor. When I saw the brain was intact, I knew then I had a responsibility. I dedicated my life to reviving it. I was not alone in my efforts to reanimate the brain. It was the work of thousands of scientists, only a handful of whom knew the true goal of the project. We cultured neural tissue. We grew whole brains. We learned how to image the brain at the atomic level and reassemble it. In short, we could reproduce the original. And once we knew how to do this, we just needed a place to put it. A human would have been the easiest, but that had certain ethical implications. What if he escaped? Many who claimed to revile him would flock to support him if he were to reappear in such a fashion. No, we needed a form which no one would ever follow, which no hateful man could be inspired by. The cart rattled forward, and now we were in a room where there were pictures of Dr. Adelman transplanting a brain into a cow. The cows are clones. I insisted on this for ethical reasons. I am, as you know, a vegan. We grow the cows without brains. They are never alive. Truly, our current capacity to do this is at about 100 cows a month. The mothers live their lives in freedom. I am happy to say, it is all done with the utmost concern for ethics. I chose cows because a slaughterhouse is what the camps were. A slaughterhouse is a place where murder is industrialized. It was the most fitting punishment I could devise. I wished to return to him what he had given to the world. The cart rattled forward, and I could hear the screams. The human screams, and smell the shit and the piss and the blood and the fear. We were going back to the facility I had been in earlier. The heart of the slaughterhouse. The building where I had been taking the pictures when I was knocked out. I'm curious that you didn't question the coloring. We have them marked very specifically to keep them distinct in case one ever gets away. An all-white cow with a single black spot on its head and a single black spot on its lips. I am told the resemblance is uncanny from just these details. And the way they speak. Did you not notice? We never planned that they should learn to speak. They are not good at it. Yet I'm surprised you did not realize they were speaking German. A cow approached us. Nothing but skin and bones, and it looked up at me and Dr. Adelman with the most piteous, comprehending eyes I had ever seen on any animal. Habt nab, bit, totet mich, es war falsch mich über and ihr zu stellen. Bit, ich flehe euchen. Es tut mir leid was ich den Juden angeten habe. I could hear the words now. Distorted though they were, I did not know how I'd misunderstood before as being the sounds of a distressed animal. Dr. Adelman whistled, and a man with a cow prod appeared and hit the starving creature in the face, sending blue sparks everywhere. As I said, these things deserve all the punishment we can give. They are Hitler. This is Hitler's hell. Further into the facility, I watched a machine rip off a cow's skin, leaving a red bit of muscle quivering where the whole cow had once stood. Lidless eyes conveying terror as the cow's mouth silently screamed. It walked around for a dozen steps screaming before blowers appeared and blew salt onto the bloody meat. Another machine appeared and whipped the animal until it fell to the ground more pulp than cow. Yet still horribly alive. I turned my head. There was the sound of the pneumatic tugger again, ripping off a cow's feet and leaving its body rolling on the ground screaming, bleeding from 4 stumps. There were a dozen cows not far away in stalls. They had been propped up and were being anally penetrated to death by spiked chrome pistons so that their insides bled and liquefied and oozed out every time the piston retracted. I watched a cow stumble fearfully out into a hot piece of iron that gradually turned red until the cow's hooves melted in place, only for the plate to grow cool again. A glass cylinder descended and encased the cow, and spiders were blown down as if by a fan, pinching and furious from the treatment and smelling blood. The cow snapped its own legs off trying to flee. We have the original living in a relatively unmolested place where it can oversee the whole process. We have mutilated it somewhat, of course. It has no tongue. We could not risk some fanatic somewhere being seduced by its words. I ripped that out myself. I'm glad to say. I used pliers and Mr. Hoffman helped me keep the grip. We also amputated its legs, although we did so more carefully than what you see below. We intend it should live a long time. Watching all of this, I did not know what to say. I still don't. And maybe that's why I'm writing this. Because I don't know if what they're doing is right or if it's so wrong that even Hitler doesn't deserve it. We have told the one in the observation booth that we will do this 11 million times. Once for every person he ordered killed. He will be the last victim, and we intend to make that last a decade. After that, who knows? The world has no shortage of genocidal maniacs who deserve this place. I couldn't stop trembling. Dr. Adelman put a hand on my arm to comfort me, but I pulled away. "Ah, you must be worried about the waste. Fear not. We utilize all that we can. We have a gift shop full of leather products. Shoes, belts, jackets, even lampshades. We use every bit and we grind down the excess and feed it back to the monsters." I can also tell you that the old Spanish proverb is quite wrong. Revenge is not a dish best served cold. I prefer mine medium well done with a slice of cheddar, mayonnaise and ketchup between a brioche bun. Would you care to join me, Miss Aronson? I assure you this meat is truly guilt-free. Story. I'm still petrified after this encounter with my new patient. My name isn't really Derek, but I'll say it is for the purpose of this story. I work at a psychiatric hospital called Serene Hills. Lately I feel more like a patient than a worker. But after what happened, I'm sure you'd understand. My heart is pounding right now just thinking about it. But I have to get this off my chest. First off, don't let the word serene in the name fool you. We take in many patients who are unwanted in other hospitals or too troublesome to manage. It may sound awful, but it's a grim reality in a grim world. Your strangest day is simply a Tuesday for me. But I wouldn't have it any other way. I enjoy the excitement, the challenge, and getting to know the patients. My job is to assist with patients' day-to-day activities, as well as keeping the patients calm and cooperative. Being persuasive really helps, and you may think that's counterintuitive for my line of work. But if you know your patients, it's not hard. I'm not a big guy, so I tend to employ more brain than brawn. I can't say the same for some of my coworkers, especially Brolin. He's the best example of how to wrestle any problem into submission. But it was ultimately his ruin. On the day of the incident, we had this new patient admitted. It wasn't very hard to guess that he was nervous. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were wild and he had frayed brown hair stuck out in all directions. One weird trait I noticed was how bushy his eyebrows were, and I even referred to him as such. I'm not exactly sure what it was about him, but I felt there was something more going on. Despite my wariness, I thought of him as a delicate deer that shouldn't be spooked. He was admittedly quiet for a while, but I continued to keep a close eye on him. Think he's nervous enough? Brolin scoffed as the new patient passed us in the hall. Oh, you mean eyebrows there? Yeah, no kidding. Looks like he's on the brink of an episode. Eyebrows, haha, I like that. For a while I didn't think you had a sense of humor. I've always had one. It's just a matter of whether people pick up on it. If I had to guess though, I'd say Mr. Eyebrows doesn't have much of one. It'd be hard to find much amusing about this place. Fair point. Day shift said everyone's been acting up more than usual today. Oh, it's a full moon. What? It's 'cause of the full moon. What's that got to do with anything? You haven't noticed yet? Patients always get more restless during a full moon cycle. You're jerking my leg. No jerking necessary. Ask anyone on staff who's worked more than 6 months. They'll tell you. There's always something weird going on during full moons. You know the word lunar for moon and lunatic are related? No way. Go look it up. Some say it's due to a gravitational pull that brings on strange anomalies or something. Anoma what? You're so typical. Brolin, what's that supposed to mean? Doesn't matter. Hey, it looks like the soup's headed this way. Let's look orderly, so he doesn't bust our chops. So the start of our shift continued toward the evening, and it didn't take long to notice the truth of the full moon phenomenon. Patients were less cooperative than usual and more resistant to taking their medication. Among other things, as I promised myself, I consistently kept an eye on our newbie. He was just nervous at first, but he seemed to slowly descend into madness the further into the day it got. My inquisitiveness about our new patient got to me, so I swung by the records office and asked to take a look at his file. Turns out they had good reason for Eyebrows being here. His name was Dimitri Burrows, and there was a police report attached. Apparently, he was still in the process of being convicted for multiple murders. They found the dismembered bodies of his family strewn about his home. A neighbor showed up after hearing noises and found Dimitri crying and holding the remains of his family. The neighbor immediately called the police. They locked Dimitri up on the assumption that he was the killer. It was understandable with Dimitri's DNA all over the bodies. But then again, they were his family. He managed to escape jail, killing some people that got in his way by the same method of dismemberment. No one witnessed exactly how he got out. After his escape, he was eventually apprehended. While back in custody, he was diagnosed after speaking to multiple psychologists. This diagnosis got him admitted to a psychiatric hospital until his trial was over. He escaped the other hospital multiple times without any casualties, and thus led him here. Dimitri always maintained that he blacked out and could never remember killing anyone. He was remorseful, which was unusual for someone who completely lost touch with reality. Perhaps there was more to this guy. After further psychiatric interviews, it was determined that Dimitri had a delusion about something possessing him any time he killed. He even said that there may be more victims because he had these blackouts many times before. No one could prove that he willfully killed anyone, and there were never any witnesses that survived anyway. What a strange case. Something about it didn't add up. But what made sense in a world that was just as mad? I went about my routine with a tingling sensation in my bones. as if my body knew something my mind didn't. Later in the evening, Dmitri was mumbling to himself pretty loud and constantly looking out the windows. Scared of the dark? Eyebrows? Brolin questioned the patient. You wouldn't understand, Dmitri started, ending in unintelligible gibberish. Hey, what's he saying? My muscled cohort directed this at me. I dunno. Brolin. He's probably not saying much of anything. So leave him alone. His name's Dmitri, by the way. He's bothering me. I don't like it when I can't understand what someone's saying. Hey, what are you mumbling about? Brolin enunciated his words to Dmitri as if talking to someone who was slow. Usually Brolin just makes snide comments at everything and doesn't zero any patients out. Why he had such an interest in Dmitri was beyond me. I got up and walked over to supervise Brolin. Time. What's the time? The patient mumbled out. Dmitri turned to me with wide, feral eyes. Despite how it sounded on the surface, it didn't seem like odd ramblings to me. There was an earnest understanding in his eyes. It's 8:15. You'll be going to bed soon. Oh, no, I need to stay out here. I want to look out the windows. I like to see the night sky. It's so pretty out. Can I please just? No can do. Eyebrows. Lights out is at 8:30. Brolin interjected. Please, can I? Will you let me? Dmitri turned back to me with pleading eyes and I honestly felt bad for him. I'm sorry, bud. I don't make the rules. And Brolin's right. We have to get everyone in by 8:30. I can't. He stormed off and began rambling incoherently again. I followed lightly behind him, still maintaining a strong urge to stay diligent in watching him. 15 minutes later, we had all the patients rounded up and in their beds, to the chagrin of some, the worst of which was Dmitri, who was still rambling loudly in his room with no sign of letting up. I can't. I need to be out there, he pleaded, but we insisted he stay in his room. 10 minutes later, his filibuster was getting even worse. I can't take it. He's going to solitary, Brolin yelled. He threw down his magazine in annoyance, nostrils flaring in excellent fashion. I didn't find it necessary yet, but he was keeping his roommate and other patients up. Now when we first took him out of his room, he was somewhat compliant at first, until Brolin started going into him. You need to shut up. You're going to solitary and there are no windows there. That's what you get for not listening. Dude, cut it out, I whispered to my coworker. That's not helping anything. I can't. I need to look out the window. Oh, Brolin, you forgot to tell him, I said, putting on my most convincing cadence. Tell him what? That they put a window in the solitary cell. Brolin looked at me blankly and I leaned in with a slight nod. As clueless as Brolin was, he could at least understand some subtleties. Oh, you're right. I can't believe I forgot. They just put that window in this week. Must have slipped my mind. Really? It's actually a great view. You'll love it. We only hoped that he didn't catch on. At least not until it was too late. It seemed a ridiculous ploy. But staying on the patient's good side means that they'll want to believe you. I never enjoyed lying to patients. But when it comes to keeping everyone safe and copacetic, you have to do what's necessary. Minutes later, we were at the padded cell where our new patient would spend his night. While not as manic as before, He was still very much on edge. Just as he got his foot into the door, he could tell that we'd lied to him about the window. No, he screamed. He fought against us to get out. And while Dmitri was a lanky fellow, he definitely had some scrap in him. If he was always this strong, it could explain how he managed to escape before. Even as beefy as Brolin was, it took the two of us to wedge our patient through the door. Even then, it wasn't without incident. I had some minor scratches and scrapes, but Brolin had a bright red mark on his cheek where Dmitri landed a decent blow. Brolin touched his hand to the spot and grimaced a bit. "Ouch," I said. "It's nothing." The coldness in Brolin's voice startled me. He was thoroughly pissed. "We'll let the nurse take a look at that. Come on." Brolin replied with silence as I walked on and soon felt the absence of my fellow orderly. He didn't just fall behind. Brolin hadn't moved an inch. "Brolin, you coming or what?" "Nah, I'm good. I'm gonna hang out here for a sec." "Why?" Brolin picked up on the suspicion tone in my voice and shot me a dark look that bothered me. Something in his eyes was beginning to raise some major red flags. Brolin left the keys inserted in the cell door, and I knew it was no coincidence. "Get me out of here." I started walking back to the cell to hopefully de-escalate the situation. "Please, let me out. It's for the best. I think our new patient needs to learn some manners," Brolin added. He banged on the solitary door with his fist. "Maybe I can shut you up for a good while." "Man, come on. Don't make this. Stay out of this. It's between me and eyebrows here. He needs to understand how things work around here. Stand by so you can open the door for me when I'm done." "Hey, don't." Before I could get another word in, Brolin cracked open the door and threw the keys at me. As I caught the keys, Brolin had wriggled through the opening before yanking the door shut behind him. I approached the barred opening to the cell just as the room turned a shade of blue. Brolin had engaged his stun gun on Dmitri, who fell to the floor. "That'll teach you to mess with me." Brolin spat the words at the patient. Dmitri attempted to stand up, but not before Brolin tackled him to the floor. My blood began to boil. Not only was Brolin getting way out of line, he'd forced me to witness his atrocity. "What the hell are you doing? Get out of there," I screamed. The door locked behind him automatically, so I had no choice but to stay so I could open it for his safety. There was no way I could leave him locked in there with a patient. But I wasn't entirely sure I could stop him without getting hurt myself. "Brolin, stop," I shouted again through the windowed bars. But the assault had already begun. Knowing Brolin for the last 2 years, I'd only seen him snap one other time, and it was nothing close to this. He was basically holding the guy down and wailing on him. "Get off him. Hey, hey," I shouted. Brolin didn't respond, so I had no choice but to radio for help. Never in my life did I ever think I'd have to call for help because of a coworker instead of an inmate. Right after I got a confirmation for backup, it dawned on me that we were the furthest from the station, which meant our backup wouldn't get here before Brolin took this any further. I wasn't a snitch, but this was a huge breach of safety protocol and morality. I needed help to stop Brolin, or at the very least, another witness to cover my ass. "Hey, what the?" Brolin called out. "What's wrong?" "I dunno. He's convulsing." Probably because you tased him and beat the shit out of him. You muscle-headed asshole. Get out of there before this gets any worse. Through the bars, I could only tell that Brolin released the patient and there was some thrashing around. And that was when I heard a deep growl from the room. Is he growling? I asked. Yeah. Do people normally do that if they're seizing? I don't know. But you need to get your ass out of there. Now. I want to see what happens. What the hell is wrong with you? Get out. Through the barred slot in the door. I couldn't see the patient clear enough to discern what was happening. But I got that weird tingling sensation that something otherworldly was afoot. I wanted to check on Dimtry. But I also knew he was dangerous and this situation could easily set him off. Brolin began to back step towards the door when Dimitri sprung up and lunged forward so fast that it was all one blurry motion. I recoiled at the loud bang against the metal door. Something hit it so hard. The door actually bent outwards. Brolin? I said, my voice shaking. I heard labored coughing and wheezing from the other side. It would take another minute for help to arrive. So I apprehensively inched the door open to check on Brolin. Lighting was not on my side and I could only faintly make out the slumped form of my coworker on the other side of the door. Oh my God, I said faintly. The idea of Brolin hitting the door that hard made me wince. I was partially surprised he was still breathing. He was going to need some serious help. I clicked on my flashlight to get a better look, but the survival part of my brain told me to locate the patient first. Dimitri was now in a fetal position in the corner, completely nude from having ripped off his own clothes. His matted hair was wilder now, until he stood up and I realized his hair wasn't just wild. It was coming out of parts of his face that weren't natural. With each lumbering step he took towards me, more hair sprouted from his body and he was way more muscular than I originally thought. As I watched him, I realized that his body and muscle mass had actually tripled. A word came to mind to describe what he looked like now. But my mind wouldn't accept it. No, they aren't real. It tried to WARNNYU. The beastly form of Dimitri spoke in a snarl. I kill ill ed those PPOPLE. But IIC couldn't help it. My mind seized up despite every inclination to run away. All I could think was to not look him in the eyes. I cast my gaze to the floor, where I watched a crawling shadow of a furry figure. His speech was nothing but guttural noises and his shadow thrashed for a moment as it grew larger to a monstrous proportion. I wanted to look up, but my mind stayed fixed on that impossible silhouette because it was less real. Still looking down, I saw Brolin being dragged into the darkness. He pleaded for mercy in wheezing breaths. From there, I only heard tearing, snapping, and Brolin's agonized screams of pain. He would not be afforded any mercy this night. My hand shook uncontrollably, causing the light to dance about the room. I looked up in time to see a bloodied, wolfish face approach me. It no longer resembled a man save for the bipedal stature. The beast's face was so close to mine that I could smell the hot breath and freshly chewed meat of my coworker. The yellow, canine eyes were horrifying and vexing all at once. I dared not to move out of pure fear, moving at an agonizingly slow pace. It sniffed me for a moment and grunted as if it savored my scent. I had to squeeze my eyes shut to stifle a scream. Then, it suddenly brushed me aside and cantered into the hallway. In shock, I watched the unnatural beast make its way through the hall and sniff about. It could have hurt me without even trying, but chose not to. One of the security guards came running in and put his brakes on when he caught sight of the creature. Holy hell! His words of amazement drifted away in an echo. The guard stayed put, his hand slowly reaching for his gun. The beast locked eyes with the security guard and sidestepped around him with little effort, never taking his eyes away. The guard witnessed the wolf scamper away out of sight. Seconds later, we heard the squeal of metal followed by the shattering sound of glass in the distance. I ushered the guard over to check on Brolin. After seeing him, we knew right away he was a lost cause. In hopes to find the beast, we both ran down the hall to find a broken window with the metal bars bent completely out of shape. Something bounded away in the moonlight outside, but we couldn't say for sure. What we could confirm was hearing a long, wailing howl before it was all over. After that night, we never saw Dmitri again. Brolin was soon pronounced dead by a nurse, or what was left of him. Anyway, now we had the task of explaining what happened without getting committed ourselves. I didn't bother telling anyone else what really happened, but Dmitri certainly had reason for wanting to be in the hallway near the windows. He knew that if he was close to them, he could escape while he still had control and avoid killing anyone. He was actually trying to protect us. Damn, that aspect made me wonder why Dmitri didn't tell us what was going on. But the answer was quite simple. No one would believe a sane person to be a beast of this kind. So why in the world would anyone give credence to a person labeled mentally ill? After that, I only work day shift and always take time off during full moon cycles. I even barricade myself in my home those nights in fear that my beastly patient will come back to finish what he started. Thinking back on the events, I can only surmise that he spared me for being kind to him. Or maybe it was just because he had a fresh meal. Truth is, I don't rightly know, and somehow that is much worse. Even now, I'm jumping at the sound of a dog barking outside. It sounds ludicrous, but I just can't help it. Here he goes again, and again, and again. I'm not entirely sure, but I swear that sometimes I hear a familiar howling. My denial convinces me that I don't recognize it. The howling is very different from the dog. It's something more feral, primordial, even, and maybe it's just me, but every time I hear that howl, I swear it gets closer each time. But I'm sure it's just my imagination, isn't it? Story. My little girl got lost on a field trip to a national park. The child the rangers returned to me was not my daughter. I recall, almost word for word, the telephone call which had informed me that Lainey had disappeared, her teacher. Calm, unbearable, all saccharine platitudes and reassurance. My own voice fraught and strangled with an instant and instinctual panic. At that time I had only just emerged, inwardly bruised and outwardly haggard, from a 2-year custody battle with my ex-husband, who had dogged me through the courts not out of any particular interest in Lainey, whom he had always handled with a stranger's cold unfeeling, but to harangue me to the point I felt half mad, my penance for refusing to yield to the man's more violent torments. Our daughter was the only beautiful thing that I had gleaned from our decade together, and I cleaved to her, my prize, my love. with such ferocity that each time I dropped her off at school in the morning I would sit in the parking lot and shake with a passionate dread of anything happening to her in the hours she was not in my care. All parents know the power of imagined horrors. The kidnapper idling on every corner in the sinister white shell of a van. The teacher alone in a vacant classroom. The husband with quick and vicious fists loitering at the school gates to whisk the unwitting child away. All these things and more cavorted my mind in a grim and raucous glee as I answered the call from Laney's teacher. Knowing with the psychic sureness of any mother that something was wrong. "It's all right, Ms. Cameron," said Miss Paxton, whom I'd always found to be an insipid and distinctly useless character. I'm sure Laney just wandered off and got a little confused trying to find her way back to the group. The park rangers are all out looking for her. I'm sure she'll be found in no time at all. It was all I could do not to scream a dozen accusatory questions down the line. How could you lose her? Isn't it your job to take care of the class? Don't you know that there are savage animals, and deep water, and steep drops out there in the wilderness? Haven't you thought about that the way I have, agonized like I have, suffered and yearned to save the innocent from all the colors of horror in the world? She's only 10 years old. For God's sake, I snapped, through gritted teeth. She must be terrified. Yet even as I said it, I knew the most dangerous thing was that Laney wouldn't be frightened at all. She had always been a placid, adventurous child, undeterred from her exploratory whims by scratches and bruises, nor by being separated from me, or any other guardian. I recall losing her in a shopping mall at the heights of the festive season. Finding her, after 3 hours of tearful searching, by a water fountain. Tossing nickels she'd found in one lint-filled pocket down into the verdigris depths. "Hi, Mom," Laney had said, her blonde eyebrows raised with a cool, adult surprise at my distress. "I'm making a wish. Think it'll come true?" Through luck and my meticulous care, nothing truly terrible had ever happened to my daughter. No wonder, then, that she could not conceive of herself at the center of such an event. Disaster was, to Laney, a distant fairy tale, the Rumpelstiltskin that only came for other children, of another time. Yet these ills had indeed now taken her. And as I languished by the phone awaiting another call, I pictured 1,000 scenarios, each more sickening than the last. It didn't help matters that the national park in which Laney had disappeared was notorious for missing persons reports and other unsavory incidents, many of which were quietly suppressed from local news. I had, of course, vehemently opposed the school's decision to include a visit to the area as part of the new curriculum. Appalled to find myself bullied into acquiescence by principal and board alike. Thus, upon finding my neurosis vindicated, I could only logically assume that my grislier fantasies would be confirmed in a like fashion. I was no retentive paranoiac, the hysteric archetype of the crumbling woman. Looking back, I might argue my suspicions were but pangs of psionic foresight, a sense that would step forth from shadowed peripheries in the following days, and make itself their heart. Smoking cigarette after cigarette in fractious helplessness, I envisioned, darkly, the face of Laney's father upon receiving the news of her death. Like the mask of some malevolent pagan god, he'd sup greedily from the liquor of my grief. The denouement of his daughter's existence nothing to him but a tool to eviscerate a reaction from me. Then, suddenly, the phone rang again, causing me to jump so violently that I spilled ash down the front of my dress. Good news, Ms. Cameron. Lainey turned up, and she's just fine. I pressed a hand to my mouth, unsure whether I was going to vomit or burst into tears. What happened? I asked. Where did you find her? There was an odd little laugh on the other end of the line. Well, it's sort of strange, said Miss Paxton. One of the rangers found her at the bottom of a 7-foot hole in a meadow. It looked to be a burrow of some kind. Lord knows what made it. Lainey must have just fallen in by accident. We've looked her over, and luckily she doesn't have even a scratch on her. If you'd like to pick her up, she's fine to go home. As I said, she's not injured, just a little shaken up, is all. I got into my car and drove the hour-long journey to the park, so soaked in the adrenaline of relief that I was like a dreamer, watching my white hands curl in spidering husks upon the wheel. When I pulled up to the park ranger's station, an officer was loitering out front beside Miss Paxton, who was holding the hand of a small blonde child with a firmness that suggested it might run away from her the moment she let go. The little figure stood with its back to me, short-haired and androgynous as an elf, staring off into the forest, as though watching something move in the trees. The other kids milled about nearby, their eyes flat and aloof. I noticed they gave the light-haired child a wide berth, which, had it been Lainey, would have been strikingly unusual, being that she made friends easily, and was close to a group of 5 other girls in her class. Not one of them looked at or spoke to her, loitering at the vertices of the clearing, whispering amongst themselves. As I got out of the car, I saw the blonde child twist at Miss Paxton's arm, attempting to dislodge itself and wander off into the woods. Although the hair was right, and it was wearing a similar outfit to that which I'd set out for Lainey that morning, nothing in its body language was reminiscent of my daughter, whose loose-shouldered, tomboyish posture I would have recognized at once. Was there some mistake? Had this idiot of a teacher somehow confused Lainey with some other unknown child? Miss Paxton turned towards me with a welcoming smile, which wavered as she caught my expression. The thin little child stranger swiveled awkwardly on her arm, still wanting to go in the other direction. Lainey, said the teacher, brightly, look, your mom's here. She spoke as she might to an infant, and from this I gleaned there was something amiss she hadn't deigned to tell me over the phone. Pressing a hand to the small of the child's back, she ushered it forwards, and at last its face turned towards me, no more familiar than its posture had been. I suppose the girl looked enough like Lainey that anyone might mistake them at a passing glance. But that was all. This child's eyes were spaced further apart, the mouth small and cruel, the nose thinner, and missing the aquiline shape she inherited from me. It was as though Lainey's own face had been drawn from memory. And a poor one at that. Cousins they could easily be, but the same child they were not. And I was amazed that the teacher that saw her 5 days a week could possibly think them identical. It was as I glanced up into the young woman's shifting eyes behind her glasses that I realized she didn't believe it. Not really. Now it seems to me that what she perceived was so beyond her understanding that she had simply elected to place her trust in the most logical explanation, yet not the correct one. Then, however, I merely assumed that she was lying to me for some nefarious purpose, and found myself coolly unsurprised. The world had always seemed set against me and my daughter. Why? Then, would the person entrusted to care for my only child be any different? What is this? I asked, harshly. Where's Lainey? Miss Paxton's face drained of color, and she stammered through a few brittle sentence starters, unable to finish even one. The girl that wasn't my daughter twitched and fussed in her grip, her pale eyes as indifferent to my presence as the sea to the swimmer it drowns. I was both repelled and fascinated by her, this tiny usurper held against her will. Ms. Cameron, said the ranger, talk with me in the station a second. She was a thin, short-haired woman, hard with corded muscle, and speaking in the sharp, almost Germanic accent that was common to some of the nearby towns. I wanted to refuse the ranger's offer, rally angrily against her with all the obstinance my fear and anguish could lend me. But in the end I went after her, looking back over my shoulder at the unfamiliar child, who flinched and jolted at the end of the school teacher's arm like a condemned man in a rain of artillery fire. The ranger, whose name was Diane Becker, sat me down in a rickety chair and brewed me a cup of coffee so black that I almost retched at the first swig. Who is that kid out there? I asked. She isn't my daughter. Was it you that found her? My colleague, said Becker, flatly. She's off shift. I'll get you her number if you want to talk to her. But anyway, I was there when Mel brought the kid back to the station. Had this with her. The teacher recognized it. The ranger picked up a purple, rainbow print backpack from a nearby desk and pushed it towards me, watching blandly as I touched the name tag and ferreted through the contents, the workbooks with their untidy handwriting, the uneaten packed lunch, the pencil case, whose utensils were all nibbled surreptitiously at their ends. It's your daughter's? Asked Becker, with the intonation of a statement. Yes, I said, reluctantly, but it doesn't matter. That girl out there? I've never seen her before in my life. Lainey is still missing. Becker regarded me without expression. So you're saying a kid turned up with your daughter's description, wearing her clothes, carrying her stuff, but it ain't your daughter? I knew how it sounded, but hearing it echoed back in that detached monotone made me want to scream out in frustration. Instead, I pulled my cell phone from my pocket and shoved it at Becker, stabbing my finger at photographs and video clips of Lainey as the ranger looked on with cool, dispassionate eyes. Look, I said, that's my baby. That's what she looks like. That's her face. That girl your colleague picked up, they're not the same. Can't you see that? And the kids in Lainey's class, none of them know who she is either. Why are you lying to me? What's going on? But Becker only shrugged, her weathered face an impenetrable slab. I don't know what to tell you, ma'am, she said. I'm not seeing the difference. I pinched the bridge of my nose, holding back the threatened tears. I'm not crazy, okay? There's been some kind of mix-up. That girl's parents are probably frantic, looking for her. Becker shrugged. Haven't heard anything about that. Only missing kid this week is yours. The helplessness I felt as I stared at the ranger was of such intensity that my vision swam like a desert heat at the edges. A white and crystalline blindness. Becker clearly noticed something amiss in my face, for she shoved the cooling coffee cup towards me and placed a coarse palm on my shoulder. If you think something's wrong, maybe you ought to take the kid to a doctor, she said, gently. Get her looked over. You know, Likely Becker thought me unstable. In shock, caught up in the sort of excitement that would die down in a day or two. There was nothing I could say to prove or defend myself. I saw that clearly. I stood up from the table, seizing Lainey's backpack in a wretched burst of anger. "She is not my daughter," I said, again. "When I get to the bottom of this, you'll hear about it." Make no mistake. For all my bluster, I was hyperventilating as I shoved my way back out into the clearing again. Every breath sawing up through my side like an animal bite. I don't remember how I went from this pitiful state to sitting with the strange child in the back of the car. Driving mechanically along the road, I only recall staring at the little creature in the rear-view mirror, looking desperately for something of Lainey in its pale, furtive eyes, its twitching person, finding nothing. There was no recognition in the sharp little features, no understanding of where it was, or what it was doing. I saw it wrestle with the seatbelt like a dog against its collar, put one grubby hand against the passenger window, as though expecting it to slip right through into the air beyond. I couldn't fathom where so wild and capricious and unthinking a child might have sprung from, and despaired that through the stupidity of others it had been thrust upon me. Through a great amount of wheedling and pressure, I was able to wrangle an emergency checkup appointment with Lainey's pediatrician, a weary middle-aged woman who'd handled my daughter's case so many times over the past 5 years. I had no doubt that she, at least, would recognize the grave mistake that had been made when I presented her with the little stranger. It was a trial cajoling the child out of the car into the doctor's office. It only glared with a beady, crow-like malice and attempted to dart past me, prevented only by my hand at its elbow. The arm was all sinew and bone beneath its jacket, soft as twigs under wet leaves. I gave a short cry of disgust, and forced myself to cling on, lest the child flee across the parking lot and into the busy road. While not Lainey, it was a little girl, and my maternal instinct to protect life still remained. I kept the stranger close to my side as I pushed it through the office door, wrinkling my nose at the scent of dirt and wet grass that lingered on the child's hair and clothes. I'm not sure what I anticipated upon presenting it to Dr. Maddox's arched eyebrows. Perhaps asking where Lainey was, if I was caring for a young relative for the day. Yet there was no such surprise. Only the usual greeting and tepid professionalism with which she carried out every appointment. As per my request, she enacted a full-body examination, including of the teeth. I had some notion, from true crime media, that the identity of the stranger might be unearthed that way. The child was obstinate throughout, not with aggression so much as an aversion to touch, writhing about with a lithe, ferrety determination. I dithered, unsure whether to feel embarrassed or disconcerted. The doctor seemed unsurprised by the display, however, going about her work with prosaic method. Only when the child was allowed to slip from the examination table and hunch, all elbows and knees, in one corner, did Dr. Maddox take me aside for a hushed conversation. "Ms. Cameron, why did you bring Lainey in to see me today?" she asked, in tones of brittle neutrality. The truth would sound akin to madness. Aware of this, I only said, "I was wondering if you'd noticed a physical difference in Lainey since you last saw her." Dr. Maddox glanced at the child, who stared out of a nearby window, observing a small bird cleaning its wings in a tree. It's not her physical health that worries me, she said. The behavioral changes, however, the mutism, the restlessness. I have to ask, has anything new happened at home? This being a delicate, euphemistic reference to the divorce. To Lainey's father. Not at home. No, I said, carefully. Earlier today there was an incident on a school trip. Lainey wandered off. Had some kind of accident. She's been like this since then. Not talking. Doesn't respond to anything I or anyone else says. She's totally changed. It doesn't make sense. Dr. Maddox made a sound of gentle understanding, and in it I lost all hope of support, of being heard. Sometimes it's the little things that trigger a reaction that's built up from earlier incidents. She said, a delayed reaction. It may seem sudden, but all things considered it makes sense. I can recommend a psychologist to look into this better than I can. I imagined the child crouching, silent and unpleasant as a hobgoblin, while I was pressured into lying to another clueless professional. No, I said, no, thank you, not today. Ignoring the concern in Dr. Maddox's eyes, I turned to the stranger we were pretending was Lainey. Inexplicably, it struck me that perhaps it was not even a child at all, an unsettling thought. Bidden from the oddness and mystery of the circumstances, yet one that lingered, all the same. Come on, I said to it, in a hoarse voice. The child's head twitched, but it only continued its watch of the window, its thin mouth slightly ajar. Then, as I reached towards it, the head turned, and I thought for one hideous moment that it was going to bite my arm with its perfect little teeth. I froze, not knowing what to do, too frightened and too appalled by the thought to strike it, too stunned to move away. At last the child stood, and when I stepped towards the door it followed, allowing me, with a short twitch, to take its clammy hand. Little though I wanted to. It was in the parking lot that I had my first truly unkind thought towards the stranger. Not of harming it, merely of leaving the child there, where it would be found, and driving away. But I knew it was impossible. I'd be arrested for child abandonment and endangerment, institutionalized. Perhaps there would be no end to my accountability, for I could not defend myself when the only other being that might have spoken in my favor had uttered not one word, nor seemed remotely capable of doing so. So it was that I took the little stranger home, feeling more resentful of her presence, of her replacing Lainey, with every passing minute. I ended up cooking something for dinner with the stiff, mindless process of an automaton, caring little whether or not the child would like what I set on its plate. It would neither sit at the table nor consider the cutlery, squatting behind one of the chairs to look at me through the slats, its face spliced into irregular oblongs by each wooden spoke. The effect of this was that I could imagine even less how the individual pieces could ever come together to resemble Lainey's features, each of an unnatural difference from hers. "Who are you?" I hissed, across the now gelid dinner. "Where is my daughter? Why are you here, and not her?" The child slid away from the chair and against the back door, scuffling like a hound plagued by worms. "All right," I said, sharply, standing up from my place with a screech of chair legs upon tiles. "Go outside. Play something." I unlocked the door and ushered the stranger out across the backyard, relieved that it went out without event, allowing me my first moment alone. The inescapable bind of my situation overwhelmed me. And again I collapsed into my chair, leaden as a coin dropped into some fathomless well. I missed Lainey terribly, thinking forlornly what a beautiful, simple afternoon it would be if she were still here, kicking her dirty sneakers off under the table with a sighing affectation of grown-up tiredness. She would have shown me a rock or flower she'd found on her trip, which I would pretend a dutiful fascination in, and cleared her plate of food in 15 minutes before managing to thieve a double helping from my own. Her boyish, playful irreverence overshadowing the very light in the room. Remembering her hammered home ever plainly that the creature I'd brought back from the park was not Lainey, and as I stood up to look at the girl from the kitchen window I wondered, with a twisting repulsion, what sort of parents had managed to raise such offspring. A light rain had fallen, unperturbed. The child knelt at the edge of a flower bed, digging with both hands in the wet soil. "Hey," I said, sharply, "what are you doing?" As I stepped outside, one arm raised to shield my hair from the rain, I saw that a number of worms and other insects were churning about in the dirt, as though the child's very digging had drawn them up, like a seagull's dance. Disconcerted, I leant down to pull the girl away, then stopped, a guttural cry jarring my chest. The child was shoveling handfuls of the infested soil into its mouth. Stones, weeds, and clods of earth alike vanishing into the greedy pit of its throat. Brown and bloody spittle hung from the thin lips in swinging strands. And I was horribly amazed that the little white teeth did not break as they ground down on grit and decorative pebbles. "No," I snarled, and with a feat of strength I didn't know I possessed I hoisted the squirming beast under one armpit and carried it back into the house. Up to the bathroom. The chaos of undressing the stranger and thrusting its pale body under the showerhead was like a scene from some Victorian asylum, although conducted in an uncanny, scuffling silence that perturbed me more than if the child had screamed. I let go of it and leant, panting with exertion, against the bathroom wall, wondering grimly why I had bothered, why I was still engaging with any of this. The child looked balefully at me from under a sodden cap of yellow hair, its cut mouth still, my eyes rooted to its pale ears, nudging from behind dripping fronds. Their tips were sharp, like white flint, unfamiliar, another wrongness, another indicator that the girl wasn't mine. Still, I deposited it in Lainey's bedroom for the night, there being no other space in the small house in which to have it sleep. It turned my stomach to think of the feral, silent child touching my daughter's things, leaving its damp scent on her stuffed animals, her pillows, the sheets, twitching and unsettled by every perceived sound from Lainey's room. I imagined the child gnawing at the walls and crawling through them like a rat, or sickness in a dying tree. I tossed and turned until my pillow was flat and my hair tousled upright. In the end I withdrew the cigarette carton I kept hidden at the back of my sock drawer and smoked to the end of the pack. When morning came, white and sore as a scar, I went to Lainey's room and opened the door slowly, poised to dart back should the child leap at me, although it hadn't yet expressed any particular violence. Outside its outbursts on contact, I well suspected an unprovoked attack would soon come. As daylight scythed through the doorway I saw that, while the bed was empty, Lainey's quilts had been pulled down between the headboard and the wall into a sort of nest. The blankets stirred, and a tiny spindle-fingered hand emerged, parting the blankets to reveal a pale eye. Squinting at the light, there was only the barest recognition there, as of the pet of an acquaintance that has encountered you once or twice. And briefly at that, I felt suddenly a foreigner in my own home, alienated by the invader. I got the child dressed in Lainey's clothes as quickly as I was able and dropped it at the school gates, half hoping that it would take off into the street and become lost indefinitely, unshackling me from its burden. Clinging to that dream, I drove off, glancing back over my shoulder to see the ugly little stick figure with its naked eyes, standing apart from the other students, insidious and strange. For the first time I was glad of my doldrums office job, numbing my sadness and the lingering dread of the cuckoo child I'd been saddled with through work. I would gladly have chained myself to my laptop for reprieve, so rapidly had all sense and perspective left me in my turmoil. How comforting the beetle drone of the machine was to me. Then, the aseptic screen, and its endless figures, and their utter absence of meaning. A telephone call came, striking me from this drab comfort like a sudden fall in a dream. Who was it to be? Miss Paxton? My ex-husband? Poised to gloat? Mrs. Cameron? A voice asked, youthful, wavering, as I hesitantly picked up the receiver. It's Ms., I said, blandly. Who is this? Excuse me. My name is Melanie Hale. I'm a volunteer at the National Park. Diane passed on your contact details. I was the one that brought your daughter in yesterday. Are you free to talk? Diane thought you might want to clear up some details with me. Diane, I repeated, suddenly alert. Becker. Yes, I remember her. She was pretty dismissive of my concerns. To be honest, I heard the younger woman swallow uncomfortably. I'm sorry about that. She just has a different way of dealing with the public. I think she appreciated your situation. But, well, it's tricky. Unimpressed by her rambling, I said, in what way? Miss Hale? Melanie? I'm certain you've given me the wrong child. And I don't have a scrap of proof. If there's anything you can tell me that would help me, I'd be grateful. There was another awkward pause before the volunteer answered. It's difficult to explain without an intimate knowledge of the park. I've been here 3 years and still it surprises me. I found your daughter in a meadow by our biggest lake. You probably heard she'd fallen down an animal burrow of some kind. How tired I was of the same story, which I little believed. Well, said Melanie, the thing is, we don't have any animals in the park capable of digging a burrow that large. And it certainly wasn't man-made. That rang some alarm bells with me. And probably with Diane, too. But she would never bring this up with an outsider. Unfortunately, a coldness ran across my shoulder blades like a shadow. I didn't like the halting nervousness in Melanie's voice. The sense that what I'd so long feared, without words, was forming before me. Is this about the disappearances in the park? I asked. I heard it was drugs. Or trafficking. That's the theory the police have been coming to us with, said Melanie, frankly. And trust me, there's zero evidence of that. But I and plenty of other people have seen things here that might be explained in less straightforward ways. I glanced around the office, relieved that none of the other workers were paying attention. Such as? I prompted. Melanie cleared her throat, a smoker's cough. This is going to sound really strange. But here it is. There are supernatural happenings here, is the only way I can put it. Everyone has their own idea of what's going on. Out in Walpurgis Town, the residents are mostly old European settler families. And they brought a lot of their old myths over with them, or contextualized what they saw with those stories. I guess. My Nana used to tell me about 5 folk that lived in caves and burrows. How they were just straight up mean and hateful to people that came across them. Sometimes they'd steal their possessions. Other times the people themselves. And they'd leave their own behind in their places, changelings. I think they're called. They're usually sick, in all the stories. Obviously I used to think it was all horse shit. But working here, seeing the missing folk that turn up, strange? I don't know. There's something here, but I wouldn't call them fairies. Whatever it is feels older than that. The phone felt slippery in my hand, as though it were a bloodied bone I held in place of metal and plastic. Like I said, Melanie stated, I'm really not supposed to talk about this. There's really no proof at all. So I could get in a lot of trouble for bringing it up with you. Anyway, you probably think I'm nuts. No, I whispered, so quietly I doubt she heard my voice. I don't. Go on. Clearly relieved, the young ranger continued with a renewed confidence. I had such a bad feeling when that teacher called the ranger's station yesterday. I always do when we have one of our weird cases come up. I was told your little girl had gone wandering by the lakeside. So I checked there first, then headed out across a nearby grassland area, which is also pretty well known for reports. When I saw that burrow, to be honest, I wanted to turn back. We all avoid them, usually, leave them well alone. But on the off chance a kid really had fallen down there, I shone my flashlight down the hole, feeling sure as hell something bad was going to happen to me for poking around. Right away I saw a little girl looking right up at me, not saying a word, just staring. Her eyes didn't look right to me, and she didn't talk, or yell, or anything. Just stood there like a rat when you turn the light on in the kitchen. Not used to people at all. I would have backed off and gotten out of there. But that teacher came running up behind me. Clearly figured from the way I was bent over I'd found something. I couldn't walk away then. Obviously, nothing I could do but pull the kid out of the burrow and take her over to the ranger's station. She was acting wild, didn't know anybody she saw. I pulled Diane to one side with my concerns, but she didn't want to know. We've gotta hand her over. She said to me, what do you want me to do? Throw her back? Come on. Then my shift was over, and there was nothing I could do. I was up all night thinking about it. I don't know if I'm even doing the right thing calling you to tell you all this. You are, I said. You did. I hung up, and sat with my face in my hands, like a scene from a melodrama, yet feeling nothing of that passion. Nothing but the sureness of what I must do. At the end of the school day I went to pick up the child. As I'd anticipated, Miss Paxton was standing with it at the gates, her mouth pressed into a line as thin and white as a chalk drawing. Hi, she said, faintly. Can we talk? Lainey's been having some difficulties at school today. Of course she has. I cut in, sharply. And we both know why that is, don't we? The teacher looked taken aback, a guilty avoidance in her eyes. I looked at the child, which seemed even less a fit in its own skin than ever, flinching and glaring at every passer-by. I gazed hard at the odd little face, the clawing hands with dirt under the nails. Let's go, I said, And the child followed, if only in that it knew, in some base manner, that I was its caretaker here, above earth. I drove out to the national park without even stopping at home first, having already been by to pick up a change of clothes and a spade, which I had packed in a canvas bag in order to be less conspicuous. The sun was a low, yellow-red stain against the sky, looking like blood in egg yolk as I tumbled the child out of the car and ushered it out onto the trail. The light imprinted itself on the edges of my vision as we walked, turning all I saw that same shade. I had a map of the park with me, which was easy enough to follow. Laney's class hadn't ventured particularly far out, only a couple of hours along one well-used path. Whether or not the child knew then where I was taking it, I don't know. It stumbled at the end of my arm with the same fussing displeasure with which it seemed to regard all things. The lake came into view, and the mountain range beyond it. To the right lay a stretch of grass so flat it was like absinthe spilled across a desktop, intimidating in the vastness of its plains. This was where the ranger, Melanie, had found the child dressed in my daughter's clothes. This was where the burrow dwellers lived. The old mischiefs of Walpurgis legend. I should have laughed to find myself believing in such myths without question. But I had seen this creature devour dirt and stones. Could feel, now, with a firm conviction, the watchful, humming presence of something underfoot. Far, far down. Heading out there, I hadn't expected to come across a burrow. The chance of doing so in such grand terrain was inconceivable. Yet the park seemed full of such unlikely details. For after a further 20-minute excursion, I nearly found myself tumbling down into a pit much like that which Melanie had described. I stood at the mouth of it, feeling, as I peered down, the same crushing numbness that had gripped me since the telephone call in the office. Grief without hope of an end was that draining absence. And yet it was through that very hope that I was there. "Look," I said, to the child, "that's where you came from. I want you to go back down there and give me my daughter." I don't know why I thought it would understand me. Its white-blue eyes were lifeless but for the captured flare of the sun. Its mouth slack, speechless. The young ranger had said the burrower dwellers left their sick in place of the people they took. This creature was surely one of them. Insensible to anything that was said to it. That, or like any animal, it only heard my voice as a series of meaningless sounds. Either way, it could not respond to me, could not give me what I asked for. I looked at the stranger for a long moment, glancing over my shoulder and all about us, seeing no one else in view at this odd hour. Then, with a quick motion I couldn't take back, I stepped up behind the child and shoved it down into the burrow with both hands, glad that its scrabbling attempts to clamber back up the crumbling sides only pulled grass and dirt down on top of it. I heard it moving at the bottom of the pit, scratching with its fingernails, and took the spade out of my bag. If the child made any headway up the sloping side of the burrow, I would push it back down. I decided, repeating the act as often as I had to until the ones that had sent it above ground returned my Laney to me. Surely they had her, still, I told myself, had kept her like a pet in their warrens. A thievery that might be reversed. Yet as I sat on the grass by the burrow, waiting, I began to consider, with all the imaginative plenty of dread, the possibility that something more terrible than merely being taken might have befallen my daughter. As night fell, and the cold, and the dark, and the silence provoked me, I at last began to wonder if the young ranger and I had been mistaken. Perhaps the little girl I had thrown down into the hole in the earth had been my daughter. After all. Story. There's something on Mount St. Helens. Mount St. Helens. The name is usually associated with a massive explosion that claimed the lives of more than 50 people and caused $1 billion in property damage. Now I think it should be known for something else. I was hiking the mountain with some friends of mine, Tom and Josh. Those two had been my best friends ever since elementary school. Tom was getting married in a week and insisted we go out camping. We were gonna hike up the side of the mountain and make camp for a few days. The first night was great. We made camp, sat around a fire, drank and told stories just like old times. Josh was the first one to turn in, leaving me and Tom alone with the fire and booze. We chatted a bit more before he stood to head to bed. He asked if I was gonna turn in, but I shook my head and told him I'd wait to make sure the fire went out. He ducked into his tent. As I sat there alone with my thoughts, then I noticed something. There was a pair of glowing red spots shining at me from the trees. I shook my head and rubbed my eyes. When I looked back up, they were gone. Had I imagined them? Maybe I'd had too much to drink. Or maybe it was just an owl. Those spots were pretty high up, but they looked pretty big to belong to an owl. I sighed and kicked dirt over the embers of the fire and went into my tent. I crawled into my sleeping bag and started to doze off. Just before I did though, I thought I heard something. Like something rubbing against the tent. But by then it was too late and I drifted into a dreamless sleep. I awoke to the smell of coffee and roasting sausages. I stepped out of the tent and saw Josh, always the early bird, was making a breakfast of coffee and sausage. I sat with him and enjoyed the crisp morning air and took in the scenery. I talked with Josh for a while before Tom woke up and joined us. We all sat together for a bit before we started packing our gear to go on a hike. While I noticed something weird. There seemed to be weird prints around the camp and tent. I wasn't really sure what they were. Then again, I wasn't an animal expert. But the weirdest part was that I didn't see any tracks leading to or from camp. They just circled the camp for a while before ending abruptly near my tent. Maybe it had climbed a tree? It was possible, but there weren't many trees near the campsite. Before I had much more time to dwell on this, Tom called for me to join him and Josh. I shook my head to clear the thoughts and joined them. It was amazing. The forest had recovered beautifully from the disaster just 40 years prior. We took pictures and talked and laughed. It was perfect, until we came upon a body in a tree. Josh was the first to notice it. He was in the middle of making some joke about an athlete when he stopped and paled. I turned to see what froze him and felt the blood drain from my face. Suspended in the tree, 15 or 20 feet up, was a deer. Its body had been badly mangled. Its head held onto its body by a few strands of flesh. Its rear limbs were missing, and its stomach was ripped open with most of its entrails missing. Its body was stuffed in the crevice between two branches. Tom threw up at the sight and none of us said anything. I think Josh broke the silence. He wanted to know what could have done something like that. I shook my head and told him that it could have been a cougar. I had heard that some big cats carried their kills up in trees. That didn't put him at ease. Tom explained that he had spoken to a park ranger before they came up here and they had said there weren't any large predators spotted near here. But even if it was a cougar, there wasn't much of a chance it'd bother us at camp. Plus, he showed us a hunting rifle he had brought, just in case. I suppose that was enough for Josh, since he calmed a bit at that and we resumed walking. Though this time we were silent. I didn't entirely think it was a cougar though. That body was pretty torn up and there were no claw marks on the trunk of the tree. But I didn't voice those concerns. By the time we made it back to camp, it had started getting dark, but the mood had lightened considerably. We were back to joking and laughing. The dead deer all but gone from our minds. But we fell silent once we saw the state of our camp. It had been totally ransacked. Our tents were ripped to shreds and our supplies were strewn all over the place. The coolers containing our food had been ripped open or totally crushed. I even saw one that looked like it had been flung 20 or 30 feet away. At first I didn't see the beer cooler, until I looked up and saw it sitting between two branches 20 feet off the ground. Tom and Josh immediately began searching the remains of the camp for anything we could salvage. Both convicted that whatever had killed the deer had found our camp and ransacked it, and I agreed. While they searched for anything to salvage, I searched around for tracks. There were plenty large clawed footprints around the camp that I had a hard time identifying. But the part that confused me was that, once again, none of tracks were heading in or out of camp. I turned to point it out to the others but felt my voice die in my throat as my eyes fell on something in the trees. A massive shape with red eyes glaring at me. It stood in the darkness of the tree branches, at least 20 feet off the ground, and I could just barely make out the shape of it. I could see a large, powerful body with muscular arms ending in claws that glinted in the rising moonlight. I saw a snout, almost like a wolf or bat, that was filled with sharp yellowed teeth. I was about to yell for one of the others when massive bat-like wings unfurled from behind the creature and launched it into the air and out of view with a single powerful flap. I quickly turned to the others, desperate to confirm if they saw what I saw, but was quickly silenced when Josh made a sound of triumph and held up the keys to his car. He explained that we could likely make a trip to a nearby ranger station and tell them what happened. Then sort things out after that. He began making his way to the edge of camp but only made it halfway when a massive dark shape dropped from the sky right on him and vanished upwards just as quickly, taking Josh with it. He didn't even have time to scream. Tom immediately began to panic, shouting, "What was that? What the hell was that?" while I searched the dark sky for any sign of Josh or whatever took him. There was no sign of either of them. Tom was still freaking out when I grabbed him by the shoulders and told him we had to go to the truck and try to get help. He still seemed to be in shock but numbly nodded and grabbed his rifle before we both made a mad dash through the woods. We ran as fast as we could, terrified we'd feel claws digging into our backs or shoulders with every step. However, I guess luck was on our side since we made it to the cars without anything happening. In fact, we were both running so fast we ended up nearly slamming into the car door. I immediately started yanking on the handle, desperately trying to open the door, when Tom's hand suddenly grabbed my shoulder. I turned to face him and saw he was pale and there were tears in his eyes. I nearly came to tears myself when he reminded me that Josh had the keys. I don't know how long we stood there, an air of utter despair washing over both of us. Before it was all shattered with a crash from behind me, I quickly turned to see Josh's mutilated body laying on the roof of the car. His eyes and most of his face had been clawed off. I opened my mouth to scream when suddenly I was nearly deafened by the sound of a gunshot from behind. When I turned around, I saw Tom aiming his gun at the sky, wildly firing at a dark shape above. If any of his shots made contact, that thing didn't show it. While he shot, I began desperately searching through Josh's pockets for the keys. I finally felt my fingers make contact with cold metal and pulled them out with a triumphant yell. I turned to tell Tom I had found the keys, but just as I did, I heard a sound that froze my blood. The click of an empty gun. Tom turned to me, a look of fear and despair in his eyes. Before he was tackled to the ground by that thing, I felt its wing hit me and I was knocked to the ground. The sound of Tom screaming and flesh tearing filled my ears as I saw the creature ripping into him. Instinct took over and I rolled under the truck. I closed my eyes and covered my ears, but the sound of Tom's screams still pierced into my mind. It felt like hours before they stopped, but it was likely only moments. When silence finally fell, I slowly opened one eye, terrified that the monster would be inches from my face. Instead, I saw the remains of Tom. His head was laying a few feet from his body with its empty dead eyes staring at me. I strained my ears and eyes to catch any sign that that thing was still there, but I didn't see or hear anything. Part of me wanted to desperately climb out and try to get in the truck before it got me. But fear gripped my body and stopped me from moving. What if it was on the roof, or hovering just above the truck, waiting for me? I spent the entire night under that truck. Any time I mustered the courage to try and crawl out, I thought I heard the beat of massive wings or something shifting on the roof of the car. Even when the sun came up, I was too afraid. The only thing that finally encouraged me to crawl out was the screech of tires. I looked up to see a park ranger vehicle near the truck. I quickly crawled out from under and staggered towards the ranger. What happened next was a blur. I remember desperately trying to explain what happened while the ranger looked at the bodies of my friends with a look of horror. I remember waiting at the station and trying to convince them that a flying monster killed my friends. They didn't believe me. Of course, they also didn't believe I had killed my friends. According to them, no human could have done that to them. The attack was attributed to a bear that was seen in the area a few days later. Funerals were held for Tom and Josh. Most people were sympathetic and said they were happy I managed to make it out alive. Tom's fiancée didn't say a word to me. The look she gave me was enough. I attended therapy afterwards, at the request of my family, and they said I was suffering from survivor's guilt and that I made up the monster I saw out of terror. They're half right. I shouldn't have survived that night. But I didn't make up that monster. I know I didn't. I'm writing this in my car on the side of the road, back on the mountain. My gun is in the seat next to me. I'm going back to the campsite, and this time I'm not returning without that thing. No matter what. Mysteries are everywhere, and some may be closer than you think. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next mystery. See you in the next story.